Up, we welcome back storyteller and Maggid, Jim Brulé.
Hi, I'm Maggid Jim Brulé. I'm a transformational storyteller, and I love to share stories from many different traditions. Today, I have a story about a family. Now, this family was kind of a typical family, a mother, a father, two sons. Let's call them Joe and Pete. And they worked this large farm. It was about all they could manage on this farm between the family members. And it was mainly grains that they grew. And what made this an unusual farm is that there was a hill dead center in the center of the property. And so that's where they had built their barn. They didn't have to worry about it being flooded from the rains. And they would carry their wheat up there and whatever other grains they were growing, store it up there before they shipped it out. Now, as I said, this was a typical family, not entirely, but fairly, because the brothers just didn't get along. As young boys, they fought and scrabbled with each other, and nobody thought more of it, but as they got older, they didn't get closer. They got further and further apart. And fortunately, the farmhouse, which was at one end of the property, was large enough to let them kind of live their separate lives. But it just wasn't comfortable. And so Joe decided that it just was not good to live with all this tension. He said, I'm going to move. I'm going to stay with the farm. I'm going to still help, but I'm going to build myself a place at the far edge of the property. And while nobody liked the idea exactly, they did think that it was a good thing to do. So Joe went out and he built his own house and he worked the property from the other side. And Pete decided that he really wanted to have a family. And so he married a woman and they started to raise some kids. And they stayed in the family house. Now, as happens, Joe and Pete's parents passed away. Nothing traumatic, nothing unduly tragic, but they did pass away. And the question was, what would happen to the farm then? And Joe and Pete decided, well, they still both wanted to run the farm, but now they were really entirely separate on the two ends of the farm, and that suited each of them. So they agreed that they would work the farm, but they would split it in half, so that there just was no reason for them to have to interact anymore. And not only did they split the farm in half down the middle, but they even split the barn. They drew a line down the center of the barn. And Joe said, I'll put my crops over here, and you, Pete, you can put yours over there. And that's what they did. And for month after month and year after year, they grew even further apart so that they didn't really ever see each other. Now, it happened one night, and who knows whether it was Joe or Pete first. Let's say it was Joe. Joe said to his wife, we have a good life. We've got our kids, we've got each other, we've got the farm. We make enough to sustain ourselves and to put some aside as well. Poor Pete, there he is on the other side of the farm. He doesn't have anyone. He must lead a very, very lonely life. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go up into the barn and move a little extra grain over to his side. Just because we don't need as much as he does. He's lonely. his wife thought that was a pretty good idea, and so he snuck up in the middle of the night and did that. Now, another night, Pete had a similar thought. Didn't have anyone to talk it over with, but he said, here I am. I only have myself to feed, and I get half of what the farm puts out. My brother, he's got to feed his wife and his family. I don't need all this. I'm going to move some grain to his side of the barn. So he snuck up in the middle of the night and moved some grain over. Well, eventually Joe realized that there was more grain on his side of the barn than on Pete's. And so he went up one night and he moved more and more grain over to Pete's side. It wasn't long before Pete realized that he had a lot more grain on his side, and he started moving some back over to Joe's side and more beyond that. And this went back and forth. And at first they thought they were having a competition about who could do more, but they each wanted to do more for the other. And finally, you know what happened. It had to happen. They were up there. They chose the same night to go up and move the grain. And Joe saw Pete moving grain, and Pete saw Joe moving grain. And they realized that they really did care for each other. In fact, they loved each other. And they embraced. And while Joe and Pete never moved in with each other, family was good and privacy was good, they did love each other. And it changed their lives. So that's the story. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Jim. And thank you for staying with us for this episode of Local Matters. From all of us at PAC TV, have a happy and safe week. We will see you next time. Thank you for watching. We are grateful for your attention. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe to The Local Scene here and share everywhere. Thank you, friends.